Revna didn't know that the man about to sign away his kingdom was the Alpha King himself. She didn't know that the parchment beneath his hand contained words that would chain his people for 1,000 years, and she definitely didn't know that the scream building in her throat would either save his life or end hers. All she knew was the lie. It slithered through the advisor's words like poison through water, making her ears ring and her vision blur. She'd been hearing lies her whole life, but never one this sharp, this deliberate, this catastrophic. The Waning Moon Tavern had been commandeered for the signing ceremony. Revna had spent the morning polishing glasses and pretending to be invisible, while guards filled every corner and nobles clustered near the great oak table. Her employer, a pinch-faced woman named Bet, had warned her twice already. Serve the wine, keep your head down, and don't speak unless spoken to. Simple enough. She'd been doing it for 3 years. But then the advisor began to read the terms aloud, and Revna's hands started to shake. This sacred pact between Valdros and the Eastern clans shall ensure mutual protection, the gray-haired man intoned, his voice rich with practiced authority. In exchange for military alliance, the crown agrees to tithe seasonal grain and permit clan passage through the northern corridors. Every word dripped with wrongness. The sound of it crawled across Revna's skin like insects. What he was reading aloud wasn't what was written. She could hear the discordance, the way his voice fractured around each false syllable. The king reached for the quill. He was younger than she'd expected. Dark hair fell across a face carved from angles and exhaustion, and his jaw was tight with the weight of a decision he didn't fully understand. Storm-blue eyes scanned the parchment, but he wasn't reading the actual words. No one was, because they couldn't see the lie. Only she could hear it. The quill touched ink. Revna's body moved before her mind caught up. She lunged forward, knocking past a startled guard, and her fingers closed around the king's wrist with desperate force. "Your advisor is lying!" The words tore from her throat, raw and reckless. Every blade in the room sang free of its sheath. The advisor's face contorted with fury, and the Alpha King of Valdros went absolutely still beneath her grip, his pulse hammering against her palm. That's when she felt it. A spark. A jolt of recognition so deep it stole her breath. His eyes lifted to hers and something ancient passed between them. Then the guards seized her arms. "Release her." The king's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk, quiet but absolute. The guards hesitated. The advisor stepped forward, his distinguished features twisted with controlled rage. "Your Majesty, this woman attacked you. Protocol demands—" "I said release her." The hands fell away from Revna's arms. She stumbled but kept her footing, heart slamming against her ribs. Every eye in the tavern was fixed on her. Every breath held. The king rose slowly from his chair. He was taller than she'd realized, broad-shouldered beneath the dark leather of his ceremonial coat. When he moved toward her, the crowd parted like water around stone. He stopped close enough that she could smell cedar and something wilder beneath. His storm-blue eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her want to flee. "How did you know?" His voice was low, meant only for her. Revna's mouth went dry. "I heard it," she whispered. The lie. What he read aloud wasn't what's written on that parchment. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise. Then a sharper emotion she couldn't name. "You heard it." "Yes." "Explain." She shouldn't. Every instinct built over 24 years of survival screamed at her to lie, deflect, play the simple tavern girl who'd made a foolish mistake. But there was something in his eyes, beneath the iron control, a hunger for truth that felt almost painful. How long had he been surrounded by lies with no way to hear them? "When someone speaks falsely, I hear it." Her voice dropped even lower. The words? Fracture. Distort. Like music played on broken strings. Your advisor's voice has been screaming wrongness since he started reading. The king's jaw tightened. He turned his head slightly, not looking away from her, and spoke to the room. "Everyone out." "Your Majesty," the advisor began. "Now." The single word carried the weight of absolute authority. Guards, nobles, servants. They filed out in tense silence. Bet shot Revna a look of pure terror before disappearing through the kitchen. The advisor lingered longest, his pale eyes fixed on Revna with an expression that promised retribution. Then he too was gone, and she was alone with the Alpha King. He moved to the table and picked up the parchment, studying it with fresh eyes. His expression grew darker with each passing moment. "Sovereignty rights," he said flatly. "Binding submission clauses, blood debt inheritance extending to all future generations." He looked up at her. "This isn't a protection pact. It's a contract of enslavement." Revna's stomach turned. "For your people?" "For my entire kingdom." His hand crushed the parchment's edge. "I almost signed it. I almost—" He stopped himself, and when he spoke again, his voice was controlled but brittle. "Aldrich has served the throne for 30 years, advised my father, counseled me since I took the crown. I trusted him." The raw betrayal in his words caught her off guard. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. His eyes snapped to hers. "You just saved my kingdom from eternal bondage, and you're apologizing to me? You just learned someone you trusted wants to destroy you. That deserves acknowledgement." Something in his expression cracked open. Just for a moment. Then the iron mask slid back into place. "What's your name?" "Revna. Revna." He said it slowly, like he was testing the shape of it. "I'm Calum." He paused. "And I need to know who else is lying to me." Revna's blood went cold. "You want me to be your lie detector? I want you to help me identify every traitor in my court." Calum set down the crumpled parchment. "Aldrich didn't work alone. A scheme this elaborate requires allies, months of planning. I need to know who I can trust before they realize their plot has failed." "And then what? You execute them?" "I bring them to justice." His eyes held hers. "I'm not a tyrant, Revna, but I am a king who won't let his people be sold into slavery because I was too blind to see the snakes in my own council." She should say no. She should bow her head and beg forgiveness for the disruption and disappear back into anonymity before Aldrich could find her. That was the smart play, the safe play. But something in Calum's voice hooked into her chest, the exhaustion beneath the authority, the isolation that radiated from him like heat from a forge. How long had he been surrounded by lies with no way to hear them? "If I help you," she said carefully, "people will eventually learn what I can do. I'll protect you. You don't even know me. You just risked your life to save my kingdom." He took a step closer and her breath caught. "That tells me enough. Before we continue, take 2 seconds to like this video. Protection isn't enough." Revna held her ground even as her heart raced. "I've been hunted for this gift before, sold for it when I was 11 years old. I spent 3 years in chains because someone decided my ability made me property." She lifted her chin. "I won't trade one cage for another." Something dangerous flickered in Calum's expression. "Who sold you?" "It doesn't matter anymore. They're dead." He studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling sense that he was seeing far more than she intended to show. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Name your terms." "Gold. Enough to disappear when this is done." She paused, calculating. "And a blood oath that when I choose to leave, you let me go. No chains, no debts, no royal summons that drag me back. Done." The immediacy of his agreement startled her. "Just like that? You want freedom. I understand that." He reached for the knife at his belt, a beautiful weapon with a hilt wrapped in black leather. "I won't trap someone who just saved me from a trap." He drew the blade across his palm without hesitation. Blood welled up, dark and visceral in the lamplight. He offered his hand, waiting. Revna's fingers trembled as she took the knife. The metal was warm from his body. She made a shallow cut, wincing at the sting, then pressed her palm to his. The moment their blood touched, the world shifted. Heat flooded through her, starting where their hands joined and radiating outward until every nerve sang with awareness. It wasn't just the magic of the oath sealing. Beneath it, wrapped around it, something far older stirred. Recognition, claiming, belonging. She saw his eyes widen, felt his fingers tighten convulsively around hers. His breath came faster, and for one suspended moment, neither of them moved. Then Caleb released her hand like he'd been burned. That was... He stopped, swallowed, started again with rigid control. The oath is sealed. You have my word. Revna cradled her palm against her chest, still feeling the ghost of his touch. What was that? Nothing. The word came too quickly. His expression had shuttered completely. I'll send someone to collect you at dawn. Pack whatever you need. He turned and strode toward the door, every line of his body taut with restraint. Caleb. He stopped but didn't turn. I heard you just now, she said softly. When you said it was nothing. That was a lie. His shoulders tensed. For 3 heartbeats he stood frozen in the doorway. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with a bleeding palm and questions that burned hotter than the wound. Dawn arrived wrapped in mist and uncertainty. Revna had barely slept. She'd spent the night packing her few belongings into a leather satchel, 2 worn dresses, a knife she kept strapped to her thigh, and a silver hairpin that had belonged to her mother. Everything she owned fit in a bag smaller than a bread loaf. The knock came precisely as the first light crept through her window. She opened the door to find a woman in dark riding leathers, her black hair cropped short and her expression professionally neutral. I'm Thessa. His Majesty sent me to escort you. Your employer has been compensated for the loss of your services, generously. Thessa's tone suggested this wasn't a topic for discussion. We ride within the quarter hour. Revna followed her through the waking streets, hyper-aware of every shadow. Aldrich knew her face now, knew what she could do. Every alley felt like a threat. 3 horses waited at the city's eastern gate. Thessa mounted the first. A young guard with copper skin took the second, and the third, a dappled gray mare with intelligent eyes, was clearly meant for her. She's called Mira, Thessa said. She'll follow our lead. Just hold on. The ride took most of the morning. They left the main road after the first hour, winding through forest paths that seemed to exist only in Thessa's memory. The trees grew ancient here, their canopies so thick that sunlight fell in scattered coins across the moss. Then the forest opened, and Revna forgot how to breathe. The castle rose from the mountainside like it had grown there, all dark stone and impossible angles. Towers spiraled toward the clouds. Waterfalls cascaded down the cliff face, feeding into a river that circled the fortress like a moat. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Thornhaven, Thessa said. Home of the Valdros kings for 900 years. They crossed a bridge carved from a single massive stone and passed through gates guarded by warriors who nodded at Thessa with familiar respect. Inside the walls, the courtyard bustled with organized chaos. Soldiers drilling, servants carrying linens, children chasing a spotted dog between the stables. It felt alive, not the cold formality Revna had expected from a king's fortress. Thessa led her through corridors lined with tapestries depicting hunts and battles and moments of peace. Finally, she stopped before a heavy wooden door. Your chambers. There's a bath being drawn, and food will be brought shortly. She paused, something almost like warmth softening her features. His Majesty asked me to tell you that your room belonged to his mother. He wanted you to feel safe here. The words landed somewhere unexpected in Revna's chest. Why would he do that? Because he remembers what it's like to feel hunted. Thessa opened the door. Rest. He'll send for you when he's ready. Revna stepped inside and found a room 3 times larger than her entire quarters above the tavern. A fire crackled in the hearth. Fresh flowers sat on the windowsill. And on the bed, a folded piece of parchment with her name written in bold, decisive strokes. She opened it with trembling fingers. You're not property here. You never will be. See. The summons came 2 hours later. Revna followed a silent servant through corridors that twisted deeper into the mountain until they reached a chamber carved from the living rock. Caleb stood at a long table covered in documents, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, his expression carved from granite. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered behind his eyes before he locked it away. Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? Always. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit, please. She sat, keeping her spine straight and her hands visible on the table. The servant disappeared, closing the door behind them. Aldrich has been confined to his quarters, Caleb said without preamble. Officially, he's recovering from sudden illness. Unofficially, I have 6 guards watching his every breath. He'll have contacted his allies by now. Almost certainly. Caleb's jaw tightened. Which is why we need to move quickly. I've summoned my council for a meeting tomorrow. 12 members. I need to know which ones I can trust. You want me in the room? I want you observing from behind the servants' passage. There's a viewing gallery with carved screens. You'll hear everything without being seen. Revna considered this. And if I identify traitors, then I'll deal with them. Quietly, carefully, without giving the others time to regroup. What about Aldrich? He's the head of the snake. Something dark crossed Caleb's features. Aldrich is a symptom. Someone is financing this. Someone with resources beyond a council advisor's salary. The pact he tried to make me sign. It was drawn up by Eastern clan scribes. Their legal language. Their binding magic. He spread his hands on the table. The clans in Valdros have been at peace for 2 decades. Why would they want to enslave my kingdom now? Unless someone offered them something worth breaking peace for. Exactly. His eyes met hers. Someone inside my borders is selling us out. I need to find them before they realize their first plan failed. The weight of what he was asking settled over her. This wasn't just identifying liars. This was dismantling a conspiracy that reached into the heart of his kingdom. I'll need to hear them speak at length, she said slowly. Simple greetings won't reveal much. You'll need to ask questions that force detailed answers. I can manage that. And I'll need time to recover between sessions. The lies? She hesitated, reluctant to show weakness. They take something from me. Leave me drained. Caleb's expression shifted. I won't push you past your limits. You don't know my limits. Then tell me. Show me. Whatever you need, I'll provide it. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She'd expected demands, pressure, the casual cruelty of powerful men who saw useful tools rather than people. Instead, she found something that looked almost like concern. Why does it matter? The question slipped out before she could stop it. I'm just a means to an end. Caleb went very still. Is that what you think? It's what I know. People don't value me. They value what I can do. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he moved around the table, closing the distance between them until he stood close enough to touch. He didn't reach for her, but his presence was overwhelming. Cedar and wildfire and something that made her pulse stutter. When I was 14, he said quietly, my father was killed in a border skirmish, an ambush that shouldn't have happened. Someone told the enemy exactly where he'd be. His voice roughened. I've spent 10 years trying to find out who. 10 years surrounded by smiling faces and honeyed words, never knowing which ones hid knives. He looked down at her, and the isolation in his eyes made her chest ache. You're not a tool to me, Revna, You're the first person in a decade who can tell me the truth. Do you understand what that means? She did. God's help her. She did. I'll find your traitors, she said softly. I know. He stepped back, and the air rushed in to fill the space he'd left. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we begin. He turned toward the door, then paused. Revna, yes. What I wrote in that note. I need you to believe it. Then he was gone, and she was left with a racing heart and the terrifying realization that the Alpha King of Valdros might be the most honest person she'd ever met. The council meeting revealed 3 liars. Revna watched from behind the carved screen, her nails digging into her palms as the voices reached her. Caleb had seated them around a circular table, eliminating any hierarchy, and asked each member to reaffirm their loyalty oaths before discussing kingdom business. 3 voices fractured. Lord Vance, master of coin, whose reassurances about treasury security crackled like breaking ice. Lady Sorin, who oversaw the eastern border patrols, her words about troop readiness twisting into something rotten. And Commander Holt, head of the King's personal guard, whose pledge of loyalty shattered into 1,000 discordant pieces. By the time the meeting ended, Revna was shaking. Caleb found her in the viewing gallery, slumped against the wall with her head in her hands. He knelt beside her without speaking and pressed a cup of cool water into her fingers. 3, she managed. Vance, Sorin, and Holt. His expression didn't change, but she saw his hands curl into fists. Holt, he repeated flatly, the man who guards me while I sleep. I'm sorry. Don't be, you just saved my life. Again. He helped her stand, his grip firm but careful, and led her through passages she hadn't seen before, until they emerged onto a balcony overlooking the valley below. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and amber. Breathe, he said. Take your time. Revna gripped the stone railing and let the cold air fill her lungs. The lies always left her hollowed out, scraped raw, but this was worse. 3 traitors in a single hour. 3 voices screaming wrongness until her skull ached. It's not usually this bad, she admitted. 1 lie, I can handle. But 3, all at once, all so deliberate. I shouldn't have put you through that. You didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Caleb stood beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. I could have found another way. Something that didn't hurt you. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories. Revna turned to look at him. In the fading light, his features were softer, the harsh angles gentled by shadow. He looked tired. Not just physically, but soul-deep. The kind of exhaustion that came from carrying a kingdom on your shoulders, with no one to share the weight. Can I ask you something? Anything? When our hands touched during the oath, she hesitated, watching his expression carefully. You said it was nothing, but you lied, and you knew I'd hear it. Caleb was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I was trying to protect you. From what? From me. He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. From what I felt. What I still feel. Which is? Recognition. The word seemed to cost him something. My mother used to tell me stories about fated bonds, about 2 souls crafted from the same fire, destined to find each other across any distance. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I thought they were fairy tales, children's stories to make the world seem less cruel. And now? Now I'm standing next to a woman I met yesterday, and every part of me is screaming that I've known her my whole life. Revna's heart hammered against her ribs. She should step back. Should remind him that she was leaving when this was over, that she didn't believe in fairy tales either, that bonds and destiny were chains dressed up in prettier words. Instead, she asked, What do you want to do about it? Nothing, The word was strained. You made your terms clear. Freedom when this is done. I won't complicate that with my own complications. What if I want complications? Caleb went still. What? I spent 3 years in chains because someone decided what I was worth. Revna stepped closer, closing the distance between them until she could see the flecks of silver in his eyes. No one has ever let me choose. Not what I do. Not where I go. Not who I... She stopped, suddenly aware of how close they were, of how his breath had quickened, of the way his hands trembled at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. Who you what? His voice was barely a whisper. Revna rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. For one heartbeat, he didn't move. Then his control shattered. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against him, and he kissed her back with a desperation that stole the breath from her lungs. His mouth was hot and demanding, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious, and Revna felt herself dissolving into sensation. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Caleb pressed his forehead to hers. Tell me to stop, he breathed. Tell me this is a mistake, and I'll walk away. I'll keep my distance, I'll... Ask me again. He pulled back, confusion flickering across his face. What? When this is over. When Aldrich is dealt with, and your kingdom is safe. She touched his jaw, feeling the muscle flex beneath her fingers. Ask me to stay then, and I'll think about it. Hope bloomed in his expression, fragile and fierce. That's more than I dared hope for. Don't let it go to your head. Too late. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise more than a demand. And when he walked her back to her chambers, their fingers intertwined, Revna allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, what staying might look like. Everything shattered 2 days later. Revna was in the library studying maps of the Eastern Territories when the door burst open. Thessa stood in the doorway, her face pale beneath her usual composure. He needs you, now. She didn't ask questions. She followed. Caleb was in his war chamber, surrounded by his remaining loyal advisors. When Revna entered, he looked up, and the devastation in his eyes made her stomach drop. Tell her, he said flatly, an older man with a scarred face. General Kale, she remembered from the council meeting, stepped forward. We intercepted a messenger from Aldrich's quarters. He managed to send word before we can find him. Word to whom? The Eastern clans. But the message wasn't about the failed pact. Kale's jaw tightened. It was about you. The room tilted. What did it say? That a truth-hearer serves the king now. That you can expose any lie, any conspiracy. Caleb's voice was hollow. He's painted a target on your back, Revna. Every traitor in the kingdom, every enemy we have, they all know what you can do. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. Then I need to leave. Draw attention away from... No. Caleb. I said no. He moved toward her, and the others stepped back instinctively. Running won't protect you. They'll hunt you wherever you go. The only safe place is here. With me. Where I can... Where you can what? Guard me forever? She met his eyes. You have a kingdom to save. You can't spend your resources protecting one woman. Watch me. The fierce certainty in his voice made her chest ache. But before she could respond, Thessa spoke again. There's more. Everyone turned. The message also contained instructions. Aldrich told his allies to accelerate their timeline. Whatever they're planning, it happens within 3 days. What are they planning? Revna asked. Silence. Then Caleb said quietly, a coup. Aldrich's allies will move against me while the eastern clans invade through the border Lady Soren was supposed to be defending. Commander Holt will ensure my personal guard stands down. And Lord Vance has been funneling treasury gold to hire mercenaries. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. How long have they been planning this? Years, probably. Since before my father died. His hands curled into fists. Maybe since the ambush that killed him. Revna remembered what he'd told her. Someone had betrayed his father's position. Someone had gotten the old king killed. Aldrich, she breathed, he's been working against your family for over a decade. Yes. The single word carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. A decade of searching for a ghost that had been standing beside him the entire time. Then we end this. Revna straightened. Not by running. Not by hiding. We expose them all before they can strike. How? Aldrich doesn't know I've already identified his allies. He thinks I'm still gathering information. Her mind raced. We use that. Stage a confrontation with him. Let him think he's winning. Get him to name his co-conspirators out loud, with witnesses present. He'll never confess willingly. He won't have to confess. He just has to lie. She met Calem's eyes. And I'll hear every word he doesn't say. General Cale frowned. That's incredibly dangerous. If Aldrich realizes what you're doing, then I'll be exactly where his allies want me. Dead. Revna's voice didn't waver. But if it works, you'll have proof. Testimony. Enough to arrest them all before they can move against you. Calem stared at her for a long moment. She could see the war playing out behind his eyes. The king weighing strategy against the man who'd kissed her on the balcony 2 nights ago. I won't let you die for me, he said roughly. Then don't. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. Be fast enough. Be ready. And trust me to do what I was born to do. His hand found hers, squeezing tight. If anything happens to you, it won't. That's a lie. She smiled despite everything. I know. But it's one we both need right now. They moved that night. Aldrich was still confined to his quarters in the Eastern Tower, guarded but not yet arrested. Calem had wanted to maintain the illusion of mere suspicion rather than certainty. Now that illusion would become their weapon. Revna dressed in simple servant's clothes, her hair braided back, a tray of food in her hands. The plan was straightforward. She would deliver Aldrich's evening meal, and Calem would arrive moments later for a private conversation. Hidden witnesses, General Cale and 2 trusted scribes, would record everything from an adjacent chamber. All she had to do was survive long enough for Aldrich to incriminate himself. Thessa walked her to the tower entrance, her hand resting on her sword hilt. You don't have to do this, Thessa said quietly. Yes, I do. He'd burn the kingdom down before he let you get hurt. You know that? Revna paused. Is that supposed to comfort me? It's supposed to remind you what you're fighting for. Thessa's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He hasn't been the same since you arrived. There's something in his eyes now. Something that wasn't there before. What? Hope. The word settled into Revna's chest like an ember. She thought about Calem's face when she'd agreed to this plan. The terror beneath his control. The way he'd held her hand like she was the only thing keeping him anchored. I won't let him down, she said. I know you won't. Thessa stepped aside, and Revna climbed the tower stairs alone. Each step echoed in the narrow passage. The torchlight flickered against ancient stone, casting shadows that seemed to reach for her. She could feel her gift stirring, preparing itself for the lies to come. Aldrich's door loomed before her. She knocked twice, then entered without waiting for permission. The advisor stood by the window, his gray hair immaculate, his posture radiating dignified outrage. When he saw her, something cold slithered behind his eyes. The truth hearer. His voice was silk wrapped around steel. Come to gloat? Come to bring your dinner. She set the tray on the table. The king will join you shortly. Will he now? Aldrich's smile didn't reach his eyes. How thoughtful. Revna turned toward the door, and found it blocked by 2 men who hadn't been there before. Aldrich's smile widened. Did you really think, he said softly, that I wouldn't have contingencies? Revna's blood turned to ice. The 2 men were broad-shouldered, armed and watching her with the flat eyes of professional killers. Behind her, Aldrich moved closer, his footsteps measured and calm. "You arrested Commander Holt," Aldrich said conversationally. "But guards rotate, faces change. You couldn't catch every man loyal to him." His smile widened. "Two of them happen to be on tower duty tonight. The king knows about your conspiracy. The king knows what I allowed him to know." Aldrich circled her slowly. "A few names, a few surface details. Enough to make him think he's winning while my true allies remain hidden." Revna's mind raced. The witnesses were in the adjacent chamber. If she could keep him talking? "The Eastern clans," she said. "The binding pact. What did you promise them?" "Territory. Valdros's northern highlands, rich with iron and timber." Aldrich shrugged. "A small price for their assistance in removing an incompetent boy king. Calum is twice the leader you'll ever be. Calum is a child playing at war while real men maneuver around him." Aldrich's voice hardened. His father was the same. Noble ideals, no practical sense. I advised him for 20 years, and he never once listened. So I arranged for someone who would. "You killed him." The words came out strangled. "You murdered your own king." "I facilitated a transition of power, one that should have placed a more cooperative ruler on the throne." His expression soured. "Instead, I got his stubborn whelp, who proved even more difficult to manipulate. So you took years to set up another conspiracy. Patience is a virtue." Aldrich stopped in front of her. "One you won't live long enough to learn." He nodded at his men. Revna ducked. The first man's grab caught empty air. She spun, driving her elbow into the second one's throat, the fighting instincts from 3 years of servitude surging back. She'd learned to survive men who wanted to hurt her. These were bigger, stronger, but she was faster. The door exploded inward. Calum came through like a storm made flesh, sword already singing. He took the first man down with a single devastating strike and engaged the second before Revna could draw another breath. General Kale followed with 6 soldiers, flooding the chamber with loyal steel. Aldrich bolted for the window and stopped when Thessa stepped through it from the ledge outside, blade pressed to his throat. "Contingencies," she said flatly. "We have them too." Aldrich's face contorted with rage. "You can't prove anything. It's my word against a tavern girl's delusions." "Actually," came a voice from the adjacent chamber, "we have rather more than that." The wall panel slid open, revealing General Kale's scribes, their parchments covered in frantic writing. "Every word," one of them said, trembling but triumphant. "We recorded every word." Aldrich's face went ash-gray. Calum moved toward him, and the fury radiating from the Alpha King made even his own soldiers step back. "You killed my father." Each word was ice and fire. "You stole a decade of my life searching for a ghost. You tried to enslave my kingdom. And you threatened—" His voice cracked almost imperceptibly. "You threatened the woman I love." Revna's heart stopped. The woman I love. He hadn't looked at her when he said it. His eyes were fixed on Aldrich with murderous intent, but the words hung in the air between them, undeniable and raw. "You'll hang for treason," Calum continued, his control returning with visible effort. "But first, you'll give me every name, every ally, every piece of this conspiracy you've spent years building." He leaned closer. "And she'll be listening to make sure you tell the truth." Aldrich's eyes darted to Revna, and for the first time, she saw fear beneath his arrogance. "The Eastern clans will still come," he hissed. "You can't stop what's already in motion. Watch me." Calum nodded at Thessa, who yanked Aldrich's arms behind his back and bound them with brutal efficiency. As the soldiers dragged the former advisor away, Calum finally turned to Revna. His composure cracked the moment their eyes met. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I heard you scream," he said against her hair. "When you ducked. I thought, I'm okay. You almost weren't. But I am." She pulled back to look at him. "Because you came. I'll always come for you." His voice was rough with emotion. "Always." She touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw, the fear he was still fighting to control. "You said something. When you were talking to Aldrich." His expression flickered. "I know. Did you mean it?" Caleb's eyes held hers, fierce and utterly certain. Every word. The following days blurred together. Aldrich talked. Under Revna's watchful hearing and the weight of irrefutable evidence, he named every conspirator, 17 nobles, 3 military commanders, and a network of merchants who'd been funneling gold to the eastern clans for years. The arrests happened quietly, efficiently. Caleb moved with surgical precision, neutralizing threats before they could coalesce into resistance. By the time the eastern clans received word that their invasion would meet a prepared defense rather than chaos, they'd already withdrawn to renegotiate. The kingdom exhaled. On the 7th day, the day their original agreement ended, Caleb found Revna on the balcony where they'd first kissed. The sun was setting again, painting the mountains in familiar gold. He stood beside her in silence for a long moment. "The oath is fulfilled," he said finally. "Aldrich is imprisoned. The conspirators are dealt with. The gold I promised you is waiting in your chambers." Revna didn't turn. "I know. You're free to leave whenever you want. Thessa will escort you anywhere in the kingdom. Beyond it, if you prefer." "I know that too." Another silence. She could feel his tension, the careful restraint he was placing on himself. "I won't ask you to stay," he said quietly. "I promised you freedom. I meant it. I remember. But I need you to know." He stopped, started again. "These 7 days have been the most honest of my life. For the first time since my father died, I've known who to trust. I've known what's real." He finally turned to face her. "You're real, Revna. The most real thing I've ever touched. And if you walk away tomorrow, I'll let you go. But I'll spend the rest of my life remembering what it felt like to stand beside someone who could hear every lie and chose to stay anyway." Her eyes stung. "That's not fair." "I know. You're supposed to let me go without making it hurt. I don't know how to do that." His voice cracked. "I don't think I'm capable of pretending you don't matter." Revna turned to face him fully. The setting sun caught the silver in his eyes, made them luminous with everything he was trying not to say. "Ask me," she whispered. Hope flickered across his face. "What?" "You said you wouldn't ask. But I want you to." She stepped closer. "Ask me to stay, Caleb." His breath caught. "Stay." The word was raw, unguarded, stripped of every royal pretense. "Stay with me, not because of duty or oaths or gold. Stay because you want to, because this is real for you too." Revna smiled, her heart so full it ached. "Yes." He kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning for years. 3 months later, Aldrich hanged at dawn. Revna didn't attend. She'd heard enough of his voice to last several lifetimes. Instead, she spent the morning in the castle library with Marin, Caleb's younger cousin who'd arrived from the southern provinces 2 weeks after the conspiracy collapsed. The girl was 17, sharp-tongued, and had appointed herself Revna's unofficial shadow. "He's insufferable, you know," Marin said, not looking up from her book. "Since you agreed to stay. He actually smiles now. It's disturbing." "I think it's nice. You would. You're the cause of it." Marin finally met her eyes. "He loves you. Disgustingly. Obviously. Embarrassingly loves you. The whole court knows. The servants gossip about nothing else." Revna felt her cheeks warm. "We're taking things slowly. You live in his quarters. Adjacent quarters. There's a connecting door, but which is never locked. Marin. The girl grinned, unrepentant. I'm just saying, everyone's waiting for the official announcement. The seamstresses have already started designing bonding gowns. You might as well make it formal. Revna closed her book carefully. Has he said something? He's said nothing, which is how I know he's planning something. Caleb goes quiet when he's scheming. Marin stood and stretched. I'm supposed to tell you he wants to meet you on the balcony at sunset. Very romantic. Very predictable. Try to act surprised. She swept out before Revna could respond. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anticipation. When sunset came, Revna made her way to their balcony. It had become theirs now, officially, the place where everything important happened, and found Caleb waiting. He wore simple clothes, no crown, no ceremonial leather. Just a man standing in the fading light, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Marin told you, he said flatly. Marin heavily implied. He laughed, and the sound was warm and rueful. I should have known. She said you go quiet when you're scheming. She's annoyingly perceptive. He crossed to her, taking her hands. I had a speech planned. Something about destiny and bonds and how I never believed in fate until you grabbed my wrist in that tavern. What happened to the speech? I'm looking at you, and words seem insufficient. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Inside lay a ring, simple silver, set with a single blue stone that caught the dying light like captured lightning. This belonged to my mother, he said quietly. She told my father she'd only marry a man who asked her properly, with no games or politics. Just honesty. Revna's vision blurred. I love you, Caleb said. I've loved you since you risked everything to stop a king you'd never met from signing away his kingdom. I'll love you tomorrow and next year, and when we're old and gray and you've heard a lifetime of my lies about not eating the last pastry. She laughed through her tears. Marry me, Revna. Bond with me. Let me spend the rest of my life being honest with the one person who'd know if I wasn't. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. From somewhere below, Marin's voice drifted up. Finally, I've had the bonding dress ready for weeks. They both laughed, and Caleb pulled Revna close, and the setting sun wrapped them in gold. The bonding ceremony took place under a full moon, with half the kingdom in attendance, and the other half celebrating in the streets below. Revna wore deep silver silk that shimmered like starlight. The seamstresses had outdone themselves, and Marin had personally overseen every detail with the intensity of a military commander. Caleb waited at the altar in formal black, his crown absent by choice. Tonight, he'd told her, he wasn't a king. Just a man binding himself to the woman he loved. When she walked toward him through the assembled crowd, his expression made her forget everyone else existed. You're beautiful, he breathed as she reached him. You're crying. I'm not. He swiped at his eyes. It's the moonlight. That's a lie. He laughed, watery and joyful. Of course it is. The officiant began the ceremony, words about partnership and choice and bonds freely made. Revna barely heard them. She was lost in Caleb's eyes, in the way he held her hands, in the impossible reality that this was her life now. When it came time for vows, Caleb spoke first. I spent 10 years surrounded by liars, he said. 10 years trusting no one, believing nothing, waiting for the next betrayal. Then you grabbed my wrist and told me the truth when silence would have been safer. His voice roughened. You taught me that honesty isn't weakness, that trust is a choice worth making. I choose you, Revna, today and every day after. Not because fate demanded it, but because you're the only truth I've ever needed. Revna's throat tightened. She'd written something, practiced it in front of the mirror, but the words vanished like smoke. So she spoke from the heart instead. I spent my whole life hearing lies, she said softly. The world is nothing but broken promises and hidden cruelty when you can hear the falseness in every voice. I learned not to trust, not to hope, not to stay. She squeezed his hands. Then I met a king who kept his word, who gave me freedom when he could have taken everything, who asked instead of demanded, every single time. Her voice steadied. You're the first honest thing I've ever held on to. I choose to keep holding on. The officiant pronounced them bonded, and Caleb kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. The celebration lasted until dawn. There was music and feasting and toasts that grew increasingly tearful as the wine flowed. Marin danced with every eligible noble under 30 and declared them all inadequate. Thessa was spotted smiling, which Revna was fairly certain was a sign of the apocalypse. Later, much later, they slipped away to their chambers. Caleb loved her slowly that night, like they had all the time in the world. Because now they did. Afterward, they lay tangled in moonlight and silence. Tell me something, he murmured against her hair. What do you want to know? That night in the tavern, were you scared? Terrified. She traced idle patterns on his chest. I was certain they'd kill me, that you'd let them, because why would a king trust a stranger over his own advisor? But you spoke anyway. I couldn't not speak. The lie was so loud it was drowning everything else. She tilted her head to look at him. And something in your eyes. You looked so tired, so alone. I thought, even if this kills me, at least one honest word will reach him. Caleb's arms tightened around her. You saved my kingdom with that word. You saved me by listening. He kissed her forehead. Fair trade. She smiled, remembering the crumpled pact, the moment her fingers closed around his wrist. The spark that had changed everything. Fair trade, she agreed. Outside, the sun was rising over Thornhaven. A new day, a new beginning. Revna closed her eyes and let herself rest, held by the only person who'd ever heard her truth and answered it with his own. Where are you listening from? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these tales.